Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lionel Sandner, and I'll be your host for this evening on behalf of Pembroke Publishers. Just before we get started, though, I would like you to know that Pembroke Publishers' head office is situated upon traditional territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiawatha First Nation, Alderville First Nation, and the Métis Nation. The treaty covering this area of land in Toronto, Ontario is collectively known as the Williams Treaties of 1923. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the Wasanic people on whose traditional territory I live, work, and learn. The Wasanic people have lived and worked on this land since time immemorial. And I wish to recognize the significant contributions of Indigenous peoples across this land. We seek a new relationship with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, one based in honor and deep respect. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our two presenters for this evening. I was joking with them before we started that anyone that is able to sit down and write a book about classroom routines for real learning is clearly dedicated to the profession, because it's such an important aspect of the classroom, especially when you're beginning. And I suspect that we'll find out today, even as experienced teachers, those routines are just part of the rhythm of the classroom. So it's nice to introduce our two presenters. First, Jen Harper. And she's kind of right below me, but she might be down to the bottom, depending on how the cameras are set up on your screen. She has taught grades K to 6 in classrooms in both public and private schools. I like that she's currently surrounded by boys, and not only in the classroom, but like me, having 3 active sons. And even though it doesn't have in her bio underlined active, I suspect that's true from my experience. She has a degree in English and theater and a master's in curriculum. And I think you'll find from today's presentation that it's true that she's constantly experimenting with a variety of strategies to engage her students and to help them succeed. And joining her is Kathryn O'Brien, a teacher as well at Upper Canada College. She loves a classroom that hums with energy, and I think we all know what that sounds like when it's happening. I suspect we also all know when it sounds like when that's not happening in our classrooms, but I suspect in Kathryn's, they're usually humming all the time. So her teaching career is focused on grades 4 to 6 in both the public and private systems. She also has a master's degree in curriculum and a curiosity of what makes learning fun, and never stops looking for ways to capture the learning spark and bring it into her teaching practice. So I think not only are their students, past and present, lucky to have them as their teachers, we are very lucky over the next hour to have both Jen and Kathryn lead us through their book, Classroom Routines for Real Learning. So Jen, Kathryn, welcome. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Lionel. Do I flip the slides? Oh, I do. Okay. Welcome, everybody. And we want to do a little bit of a land acknowledgement too, because Kathryn and I are on the other side of Canada than Lionel is. So as we gather here tonight to share our stories, our knowledge, and our many routines, we want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We know many of you are joining us from all the different spaces on this land, and we welcome you. Tonight, Kathryn and I wish to acknowledge this land as where we've made our homes. For thousands of years, it's been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land. As educators, we know we have a privilege and a power, and we're committed to learning the truth and working towards reconciliation as part of our teaching and learning practice. We also want to acknowledge where we are right now. The picture there that you can see right now is a mood meter and a little sign that says, "Hey, train wreck, this isn't your station." It's a little bit of a reminder for us. As teachers, we wear so many hats. We wear the doctor hat sometimes, the nurse hat, the police officer hat today for me. We'll wear the parent hat, the psychotherapist hat. And we're very busy taking on the needs of everybody around us. It's been tough. these past years have been really, really, really tough. Between in-person learning and hybrid learning and online learning, I actually Googled the stress of teachers during COVID, and I got 55 million results. It isn't an easy time to be teaching. And so we want to acknowledge where we're coming from and say it's okay to be in this space, and it's okay to feel frustrated and to feel overwhelmed, because we're all there right now. And so our goal tonight is to bring you through some of our very favorite routines that we've been using quite a bit to anchor us in those blazing hurricane winds that seem to be surrounding us in the last couple of years. So our job is we're going to give you as many routines as we can to sort of, for Kathryn and I, and the students as well, it's helped us stay stable in this really changing time, in this really crazy time in our lives. It's helped us sort of keep anchored and keep stable. So going to the next slide. Before we do, actually, the mood meter there's all kinds of cute little emojis. If you have an emoji that you're feeling, if you want to put in the chat, we're going to play a little waterfall routine or a mild one. Kathryn's going to do that to us later for one of our routines. But if there's an emoji that you're feeling connected with tonight, feel free to write it down. How do you feel about going into tonight? And we'll do a little bit of a check-in right now and how people are feeling and how they're doing. So if you have 1 or 2 words about your mood, throw it into the chat and we'll see how are people doing right now. So yeah, enter that if you'd like. And I'm going to bring up the next slide. We've got a quiet audience. Oh, inspired, nervous. Yes, definitely nervous, Kathryn. I'm so nervous. Very cool, Kate. Chill. Oh, that's good. I'm glad everybody else. Apparently, Diane has wine, so that's fantastic. We don't yet. I'm very glad you're grateful. This is great. This is lovely. This is a very lovely place to be. That's lovely. So tonight's plan is this. We are going to go through a multitude of slides that represent all of our teaching worlds. So sometimes we are with our teacher hat on. Sometimes we're doing assessing. Sometimes we're focusing on digital citizenship. We're incorporating well-being. We're building classroom community. We're working on collaboration with the students. We're working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are all parts of our career and parts of our job and parts of our day. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through those slides in order. And for each slide, we have at least 1 online routine, and if not 2 to 3 to sometimes 4 or 5 in classroom routines. So our job tonight, or our goal tonight, is to give you a huge bank of routines that you can take with you. Now, the beauty of this is that you're going to get to more of this recording as well as the slideshow. So you can play it slower if you'd like and listen to the routines a little bit later. So our job is to just sort of give you as many routines, focusing on the different aspects of the teaching day. If you have a question, throw it in the chat. If it's something that one of us can answer quickly while the other one's presenting, we'll totally do that. If it's something bigger or juicier or that involves a little bit more intensity, we're going to put at the bottom of our notes that Kathryn and I are keeping, and then we'll just address it at the end of the show. And that feels like a show at the end of the presentation. So that's our goal for tonight. And we're going to take turns going back and forth. So go for it, Kathryn.
All right. I'm unmuting my mic. It feels very calm having adults and not having a group of grade 3 students. So thank you again for joining us. And it's so nice to see so many familiar faces popping up in the chat. So I'm beginning with a quote from James Clear. He's an author and his work has focused on habits and routines. Atomic Habits is his newest book, and it's about small changes you can make to develop powerful habits. Its focus is really around one's personal life, but I found it really useful for thinking about what I'm doing in my teaching. And this quote I put up here really resonated with me because often I can get mired in looking at the results. Like, the kids seem off the wall. No one's reading anything other than Big Nate. I can't believe so-and-so lost their pencil again. And this quote really reminded me that when you're in that place, sometimes you need to step back and look at your systems or look at your routines. So to get the boring stuff out of the way, what is a routine? According to the dictionary, it's an established procedure for completing a task. Routines can definitely be seen as something a little humdrum and boring. When I tell everybody I've written a book, they get excited. When I tell them it's a book about classroom routines, their eyes glaze over. But we've spent a lot of time thinking about routines, and we definitely are excited about it. There's a philosopher, Amos Alcott. He's an American philosopher, and he said, the less routines, the more life. And I somewhat agree with him, but then I think if you've ever seen 30 students mob a pencil sharpener before a math test, you do understand there's a place for them. But there is something to that idea. Routines don't need to be rigid and teacher-based. And as you're going to see tonight, making routines engaging and student-focused isn't too tricky. Sometimes it's just a simple tweak or a new perspective. And just as routines can't be rigid, they can't be static either. I've been teaching since 1998. I can't have the same routines. They change. They need to be fluid and adaptive. And it depends on the class I'm teaching. It depends on the time of year. It also depends on where I'm at. I've found in the last 2.5 years, I've changed up my routines a lot just to address my own ability to teach during the pandemic. Now, before we move on to tips and tricks and all the routines we are going to bring to you, I would really love you to think about some questions. They help me reflect on routines. And the very first question I think you always need to ask before you introduce a routine in your class is it helping you? If you can answer yes, then you move to the next one. Is it helping your students? Yes? Okay, now, is it sustainable? There's plenty of amazing routines. Not all of them are sustainable. So it's good to make sure you are able to continue that routine. Does it reflect the values of your class? And is it promoting healthy learning and social emotional habits? So now that we've covered the ABCs of routines, Jen is going to start us off with how we can establish routines in our classroom.
It is this mic thing, isn't it? It's like back and forth. Thank you, Kathryn. So my goal right now is to talk to you guys a little bit about establishing routines. And before I even do that, or before I get there, I think you need to understand Kathryn and I as educators. I think if you were to look at teaching styles as a continuum, on one side of the continuum, you'd have very teacher-led classrooms, and on the other side, you'd have student-led classrooms. You just need to know that Kathryn and I lean very much this way. That's more of our style. We're not fully on the student-led classroom. We make them believe that they are. That's sort of one of our goals. We make them think that they're in charge, but really we can puppeteer them quite a bit. But we do believe in authenticity, and we do believe in their voice and having them engaged and having them be part of the process. Our first book was actually student-driven learning, and it was entirely on why that's valuable to us and how it creates autonomy and how it fosters growth mindset. So knowing that and having that background, these routines that we're going to go over, all of them for the rest of the night, are going to be ones that have student voice and student advocacy behind it. So let's start it. At the very beginning of the year, we do classroom agreements. Now, a classroom agreement can sound like a ritual that's done one-off, or it can be a routine where it's incorporated and embedded in. So you can see my kids were super excited. They saw the slideshow today and they recognized their agreements. So those are agreements on the wall there. It's the little blue sentence strips. And at the beginning of the year, we sort of brainstorm as a class all the things that we would find as rules or typical things in the classroom that we'd want to follow. We whittle down, talk about positive language, talk about how to frame things so that they're more inclusive. And then we pick 3 to 5 classroom agreements that we're going to keep all year long. That's a ritual for sure. But to make it a routine, we come back to it once a week. We come back to it regularly. My kids were really wiggly on the ice the other day. So I'm like, hey guys, you know what? Were you kind out there? Because you said one of your agreements was to be kind. Were you acting kind outside when you were doing that? Or maybe they're having a rock star moment in the classroom and they're really focused. Hey, you know what, guys, you were rock starring it. I could see that you were totally focused. And just bringing that in and weaving that language in on a regular basis makes those classroom agreements more of a routine. And in doing that, by the way, when you convert to online, it's reestablishing those routines, right? We wanted to focus and listen. That was one of our agreements that we made. What's that going to look like with mics? What's that going to look like with cameras, right? And reestablishing that. Another routine that I really, really, really love at the beginning of the year is jobs. Now, I don't have jobs in my classroom until the first 2 to 3 weeks into school. And what I do with the kids is I brainstorm all the jobs about 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in. I brainstorm all the jobs that could be happening or taking place in our classroom. And the kids won't notice where the gaps are right away. Miss Harper, you never do your attendance on time. Oh my gosh, I could totally use help with that. And so they come up with them. We brainstorm a list and then we pick about like 8 to 9. I like it when 1/3 of my class is working at one time, sometimes half, sometimes to 1/3. So 8, 9, 10 jobs. They're up there on the board. I flip them, the jobs, we reevaluate them every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on when holidays fall and long weekends and stuff like that. And all those things that threaten through our school days and our school calendar that disrupt things. But about every 2 to 3 weeks, we reestablish classroom jobs. We'll come back and go, oh, wait a second, guys, how does this job look? Are we even using the ball collector outside, or do we need to reestablish something else? And then maybe one of my students is like, Miss Harper, the chairs are never up at the end of the day. And I know that helps the people that are cleaning the rooms. classrooms. All right, then let's look at that as a class job. So reevaluating the class jobs, making a discussion, keeping it in circulation is fun. I make my kids apply for the class jobs. So by the third week into grade 5, I've already introduced paragraphs. So I've got a topic sentence, I've got my 3 ideas, and I've got a concluding sentence. So my kids write me application letters. So, dear Miss Harper, I think I'd be phenomenal at classroom cleanup. Here are my 3 reasons why, and then some sort of concluding sentence, sincerely, in their name. By the time I'm where I am now, which is like 4 cycles, am I my 4th or my 5th cycle of jobs? We've reestablished the jobs. We've talked about them as a class. We've modified throughout the year, changed things for snow. They're not stagnant. They're changing, they're developing, but their letter writing is getting awesome. I now have like a full formal letter. I've got, dear Miss Harper, I've got a hook that's really engaging. I've got their topic sentence of what job they want. I've got 3 reasons why they want it. I have evidence, which is super cute when they argue with me at home, that they really do truly clean up their room and they'd be really good at cleaning up the stuff in the classroom. And then I usually have a nice concluding as to where to reach them and access them. Bottom right-hand corner of the desks. I'm in the northeast corner of the classroom. It's super cute. But that's a nice little routine. Classroom agreements, job boards, they're democratically run. We're debating, we're discussing, we're changing, and the jobs are developing over time. The routines are, and those are just nice beginning of the year establishing routines. And now Kathryn's going to talk to you guys about routines for the classroom community.
All right. I'm just getting used to unmuting myself in this new platform, but I was wondering if everybody could add to the chat. It would just be really great for us to get a sense of how long people have been teaching. Some of your names are familiar to me, but it's just nice for us to see, because I feel that in the community we are gathered in right now, there are many expert teachers, and I'm sure all of you have ideas for routines to share. So it's just nice for us to see, and I'll let Jen watch that chat and give us some feedback on that. So in terms of classroom community, so Priya Parker, she has a great TED Talk that later became a book called The Art of Gathering. And she called teachers the original greats of creating spaces. And I was like, yes, finally, someone acknowledges what we do, because I think that as teachers, we care so much about creating community and making those spaces intentional. So I really spend a lot of time being mindful about how I create community in my classroom. So the first one is not one that is new to anyone. It's student surveys. I love these though. I do them every few months. Sometimes it's as simple as a few sentences and an emoji graph where they can circle, just checking in, do you understand what Miss O'Brien's talking about? Do you have friends you play with at recess? Getting some feedback from the students. I find that really powerful. And then talking to them about the feedback from the survey and seeing if we have to make changes. And sometimes it's not always easy to hear their feedback. Like, no, I don't understand your lessons, Miss O'Brien. Well, okay, now I have some shaping up to do. So we are going to do a little survey right now just to get some feedback from you, because when I was online, I found that was such an awesome platform to do just really quick surveys using a poll or using the chat. So if you can put in the chat the answer to this question, just keep it simple, a yes or no answer. And Jen can give me a thumbs up for yes, or a thumbs down, meaning no. And you're going to understand that I actually probably want to see us with the thumbs down, but let's see how this goes. So the question I need you to answer and put in the chat is, are we talking too fast? So Jen, if most of the people are thinking we are talking too fast, you can give me a thumbs up, because I can't see the chat right now. And if most of the people feel that we're talking at the right speed, great. Then I won't need to worry about it. So diving into a few of the different routines though I've done in my class, and you can see, perfect, not talking too fast. You can see at the top a picture of this. And I call it the change makers, because I think a key to building class community is really getting to know the identity of the class members and thinking of how to celebrate the strengths. So for this routine, I began the beginning of the year talking about what a change maker was. I shared some stories of different change makers around the world they may know of, or I'd like them to know of, like Jazz Jennings, who's a transgender youth activist in the US, or Greta Thunberg, an environmental activist in Sweden. By the way, you'll see interspersed between the pictures of my students some really amazing graphics. I did get those on Etsy. And if you're interested, put a note in the chat and I will find the Etsy store I got them from because they're really beautiful visuals. Anyway, so I put these up in the classroom. And then as we've moved throughout the year, we keep turning to these images of these change makers. And the change makers now include the students in our class. And we try and leverage the strengths of each other and bring them into conversation. So if somebody has identified that they're really creative and that's their real power as a change maker, I might ask them to go help out someone who maybe needs some new ideas. And it really builds some conversations, one around student agency and two around how we can help each other out in the class. Who am I games? I'm not even going to spend too much time on these because we all know the who am I games as educators, but I have realized it's better to have a routine of doing these throughout the year because identity does change. We do it at the beginning of the year, but continuing to ask students and find out, ways they may have changed or new information they may want to share with the class, I find those things do help build the community. When we were online, they loved doing Who Am I Cahoots. Also because a lot of us, we really do like to talk about ourselves. So that also feeds into that. This routine isn't up there. It's learning the names. It's a quick one, though. It's from the blogger Jennifer Gonzalez from Cult of Pedagogy. She mentions the idea of, at the beginning of the year, writing the students' names down phonetically, giving yourself some phonetic clues. And I do that. And I also do that with the parent names. So then I can get into the routine of saying students' names correctly. It's so important to do that and make sure they know how to say each other's names. The last one, because you're probably wondering why I have a picture of a giant fish on the screen with a bunch of dinos in the jar. I have to explain this. This is our community incentive in our classroom. I think it's really important to have a routine around acknowledging and rewarding positive behaviors in the classroom as a community. I'm not a big believer in prizes or systems that are not communal. And this is called the Dino Fish Reward. It happened because I have a son. And at the time when he was 3, he had a whole bunch of plastic dinos that I was looking to get rid of. And I found a plastic fish. So I choose the number of students that are in the class. And I put that number of dinos in the jar. And then I put the fish. The fish represents a class goal we work towards. The dinos represent individual, things that students might earn. So maybe the class is working really quietly, a dino goes in the jar. Maybe a student finally remembered to tie his shoes. Yes, dino in the jar. Maybe as a class, we've had a really hard morning, but suddenly the afternoon looks better, dino in the jar. And then the fish is something, what we do is every time we turn over our dino fish celebrations, the fish represents a class goal and the students will suggest the goals to me. And then as a class, we vote on it. Right now, we're trying to aim for quiet lunches and they're trying to earn 3 happy faces and then they get the fish. Then once they've earned all their dino fishes, they have a celebration. And I make those celebrations very feasible. They're no cost, they're easy to execute. And usually in my class, they're about 20 minutes long. And we try to have one every few weeks. I don't make this routine a punitive one. I used to have a marble jar where I'd add marbles and take them out when things weren't working. And I realized on one bleak February day, I was looking at my class and I was just pulling the marbles out like, rah! And I saw how defeated they were. And that moment, I'm like, this routine has to be purely based on positive feedback. And maybe as a class, you need another routine that addresses that they're wiggly or that they're slow to transition. And that might be a different thing. And when we were online, we moved forward with this really easily. And the reason why I wanted to feature this routine around community incentives is because I find it's a real highlight for the class, including myself, and it really sparks joy. And that brings me to Jen, who's going to talk to us about routines to foster well-being.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Kathryn. So this is so timely because we need to do a lot of well-being talks in our classroom today, as we found out one of our little peers has COVID. So there was a lot of anxiety and stress and a lot of nervousness. And so we did these routines very much today. So these routines are just to talk about the well-being and reestablishing and getting a sense of what's going on. I found these particular routines so incredibly vital when we were doing online learning because I really couldn't read how the kids were at home. And I felt so disconnected. I really thrive with having the kids around and going through a screen and trying to estimate or guess how they were coping and how they were doing was really difficult. So these are some just great little tricks I was doing online and a lot in the classroom just to sort of help me gauge things. And one is the mood meter. You saw the emoji one at the very beginning, and here there's a cute little monsters. I love the blob tree, but the best part is if you don't know what the blob tree is and you're wondering about the little emojis there, Kathryn has included at the very end as part of the resources her entire class set of mood meters, and so it's one of the resources that you'll get tomorrow. And so you can go through and you can use different ones every day. But they're fantastic because the kids can just pick one little character that they identify with, and they can explain why. And we do this about twice a cycle, I'd say, when we're in class. When we were online, I did this really regularly, like almost every other day, just to sort of gauge how they're feeling. Today we had to talk about it too. How are you feeling? And some of them were stressed and anxious. Some of them were fine, and looking forward to something we were going to do the next day. And so just using this as a routine to just sort of acknowledge their well-being and talk about it, as well as gauge it as a class, really, really, really helps. The other routine I want to talk about was Take 5. Take 5 is a great well-being routine, and it's a really great strategies for just calming everybody down. It's literally, I should have started with this actually. It's literally just putting up your hand and just taking 5 seconds to calm down, 5 breaths, like, I'm not patient enough to make it all the way to 5 tonight, but just calming down and taking 5 deep breaths, going over every finger as you do it, and just taking a moment before you start the next activity, or midway through an activity, or before they have to fill in or have a discussion about something that just happened, reestablishing their well-being and just taking 5 seconds to just calm down. Brain breaks are great. I have a very active class, probably because I'm active, and just every once in a while, recognizing the energy and the buzz in the classroom, feeling like it's ramped up. Suddenly 6 kids have to go to the bathroom at the same time. You're like, oh my goodness, we need to do something to shift this. They can't sit still for this long, or they can't do whatever they're doing for much longer. So I'll take a brain break. Guys, brain break. And we'll do quick, I've done push-ups with them. I used to do jumping jacks, but I realized in my mid-40s that I can no longer do jumping jacks with the students. But now I do all kinds of fun things instead. There's all kinds of technological ones too, I think, with the little guys, where they'd have like a 5-minute dance or a 1-minute go noodle type thing activity. So there's online resources for it. But if I say brain break, we know they're going to get a movement. And then I say brain break done, they're good. They're really good. Sometimes I just have them do a lap around the classroom. Or, guys, we're transitioning between one activity to the other, take a brain break. They'll come up to me sometimes and say, Miss Harper, is it time for a brain break? So then I know what's happening. The coping toolbox is one that I've had in my back pocket for a while. I've used it a little bit with COVID, but it's a little bit trickier because it involves shared items. But I'm starting to bring it back in again. But the coping toolbox is just literally a box with all the fun toys in it that the kids might need to cope through a variety of activities. And I like that it's communal and not just like that child over there has a fidget toy because that child needs it. It's more, this is a communal box. We share it, and we all have times when we mentally just need to refocus, and we all have times when we need a wiggly chair. And it's okay to have those moments, and it's part of our well-being. And it's part of our mental abilities, and that's totally all okay, and that's totally great. And so what the kids can do is this coping toolbox has a bunch of little things, maybe squeezy toys. I do have wobbly chairs beside it, and I have all these different things, and the kids can sign them out. At the very beginning of the day, when we talk about beginning routines, I'll explain that I go over the agenda. And when I go over my agenda in the mornings, I talk about the activities we're doing. And I do give them a little bit of a debrief. So I'm like, okay, guys, we're going to be essay writing. It will be a sit-down activity. Okay, then we're going to be having phys ed. Obviously, it's a movement activity. You know what? Today for math, it's actually going to be group work, and you're going to be working in small groups around the room. So they have a sense as to how the day is flowing. And then they can sit there and say, you know what? I'm going to need something to squeeze and play with during the group work because I have a tendency to get really distracted. I want to stay on task today. And so it's a sense for them, it gives them a chance to do the autonomy and to figure out how to cope with their own well-being and how to manage that a little bit. So just another trick or routine to keep that stuff going. Kathryn's going to share next with some diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. Routines, not stuff, routines.
We got ahead of ourselves with our moving the slides. So before we begin these routines, I do want to acknowledge that work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, it needs to be infused in the curriculum, your teaching practice, the culture of your classroom, and your school. And trying to use the word routines alongside this work sometimes feels a little trite given the impact and importance of this work. But in truth, we do need to consider about how we bring this work into our practice. It can't be something that we parachute in as a reactionary measure to a global event or crisis, or at certain times of the year during Black History Month or Truth and Reconciliation Day. It needs to be constant, informed, and intentional. And taking times to set up routines around well-being, as Jen has spoken to, and community, as I spoke to, will help be some of those blocks that allow you to do this work with your students. So I have looked a lot to outside experts. I'm a cisgender white woman. So for me to begin this work, I want to rely on people who've experienced this work as educators and people within our community. Liz Kleinrock is someone who is absolutely amazing. Her Twitter is at Teach and Transform, which is on our resource page. She wrote a book called Start Here, Start Now. I think it's actually essential reading for any elementary student, teacher, about how they would begin this work and to ensure it's embedded in their practice. Another resource is Key Growth from Woke Kindergarten. They are an early educator and they look for ways to bring resistance, liberation, and healing into the curriculum. So I'm going to give a few ideas, but these are two educators who I lean on and I trust, and I know I can rely on their work. So one big thing for me is the identity posters, or some kind of way that you have a routine in your class. And I already mentioned some in Classroom Community about how you celebrate student identity. And is this in a visual spot in your class? And you can see one of our identity posters up here on the board. For older students, these may be like identity mountains, showing sort of the iceberg style, or it might be an I am poem. I think having some visible space in your classroom where you celebrate student identity throughout the entire year is essential. So the visitors to your classroom can see who these students are and get a sense of what makes them themselves. Another routine are identity building blocks. And this really refers to what I am intentionally doing within my teaching to facilitate conversations in my classroom around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And thinking about, if I've put those building blocks into place, like, do my students have the knowledge to understand so we can begin these conversations in the classroom? Liz Kleinrock, who I mentioned earlier, she talks at length about this in her book. So for example, if I wanted to talk about LGBTQ+ communities in my classroom, have I talked about gender identity with my students? Have I talked about gender expression? Have I talked about how families are the same and different? For me, this routine usually involves being very mindful about the picture books and the literature we bring into our classroom, the current events we look at, the stories of those change makers I was mentioning earlier. It might also mean this is not a routine I've actually brought into practice, but it's something that I have seen and heard about recently in a conference, and that is maybe having some kind of class word wall that defines words that you want and need to have in conversations that center DEI work. So it could be, what is an ally, allyship, justice, inclusion, stereotype, bias, discrimination. I teach grade 3. We've already talked about these words, and they know these words so they can come up in conversation. Another thing there I mentioned is the language survey. And this is something you could do, a routine you could do with your students, or it's a routine I think you should practice on your own. And that is to go through, anytime you begin any new unit of study, in particular ones that involve history, social studies, also I've heard of teachers bringing this into the science curriculum, and taking a look at the language that is used. And thinking about whose story is being told, whose stories aren't being told. What are the resources you're using, and what language is being used in those resources? Are you saying settlers, explorers, colonizers, invaders? What stories are missing? And if you do this with your students, and already with my grade 3 students, we've had some of these conversations throughout the year, they're starting to notice that stories are missing when we look back in history. I talked a little bit about the idea of bringing current events in to conversations to support the DEI work in your classroom. I have a routine I use up there, which is a picture of the day. That's from Noah Daniels, an Ontario educator. And I know Jen uses one called World Watch Wednesdays. And talking about global issues is a way to really bring those conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion into your classroom. It's really important. I'm very mindful of the images for picture of the day that I choose. And often the students will help me choose. And I really want to focus on stories of activism, stories of joy, stories of resistance, and not oppression. so that these conversations can become some of those identity building blocks that I mentioned. I know with Jen, because she's teaching older students in grade 5 for her World Watch Wednesdays, she really works to find a whole bunch of different perspectives to bring to global issues. And the last thing is, part of ensuring that we have the student voices heard in our classroom is really to consider how we foster routines around collaboration. And I'm going to move that over to Jen.
Thanks, Kathryn. So, okay, I got the slides done. Yay! Oh, we did it again. All right. These are some of my favorites. I don't know how those pictures turned out so pretty. It was just the light of the day. But I want to share with you a few routines to help the kids foster a space of collaboration where their voices are heard, they're building on each other, and they're actively listening to each other. So I'm going to share 2 that work really well in terms of that. And then I'm going to share a few that work well in a different scenario. And I'm going to give you those examples. So I guess the first one I talked about was my turn sticks. And these, Kathryn actually coined these and introduced these to me. And she used to call them the talking sticks. But with cultural appropriation and realizing that many cultures around the world use talking sticks as something that's meaningful to them, we've changed them to my turn sticks. And it's quite a clever little idea of hers. We basically, so in this situation, you can see my kids have their World Watch Wednesdays there, but they have an article that they've read. And they've got them around the table, and then each child is given 3 sticks. Now, I've had it every year in my class, and maybe I'm the only one, but I get a couple that would love to talk right away, and then a couple that are very shy, and then a bunch that are in between. And so these talking sticks equal out that playing ground. What they basically do is that every time somebody wants to share an idea or share a thought, they put 1 stick in the middle. So somebody will share a stick. At the beginning, you'll have that very eager child putting all their sticks in the middle, and the really shy one and the quiet one sort of slowly realizing that they don't get to redistribute the sticks and they don't get to move on until everybody's shared 3 ideas. And so suddenly they have to be sort of forced to share them. But then as the year goes on, and as this is a routine that you use consistently or continually, it builds and builds and builds. And it's really fun because the ones that love to share their ideas really quickly start to slow down a bit. And they're like, wait a second, I kind of want to add in at the end a little bit. I want somebody to hear, I want to reflect on somebody else's thoughts. So they'll hold back a stick. And then my shy or quieter ones, who are hesitant at first are going, okay, I know I'm gonna have to get this done anyways. So I'm gonna get 1 in there right away, probably my second one sooner or later. And then I'm gonna hold on to my last one for a little bit later. But the idea is that it equalizes the conversation. Another one that I love, and I use this so frequently, it's unbelievable, is pick me sticks. This is Barry Bennett's from Oise, and he did it to us in class. And I tell you, man, it was effective. Basically what he did is he used these talking sticks. I just want to make sure my mic's on. Yeah. Okay. He used these pick me sticks. You would open up a big question such as, this is, I agree with this character's choice in the novel. And it's something, a broad, open-ended question that has multitudes of answers. And I'll say, okay, guys, I'm going to be using the pick me sticks for this. And then the children have a clue that they're going to use it. And it says, okay, you get 2 to 3 minutes to discuss it in a group. And sometimes when you do group work, they sort of get off task. By doing this, you call them back to task really nicely. And then so they have a few minutes to do it. And then you call on them. You'll be like, all right, pick out a stick randomly and say, all right, Massimo and Sarah, what did you and Sarah do or talk about when, in terms of the character's choice? What did you guys think? So not only have I given the heads up that I'm using them, I've given them a chance to talk to somebody else, but I'm calling them to speak on behalf of a group, not as an individual. So it's not like a pick a stick out of a hat and go, you 9 times 9. It's much more of an inclusive, safer space in that, but it's accountability. When I say I'm going to be using pick me sticks and I give them 2 to 3 minutes to talk, I know they're not going to go off task because they know they could be called to task at any moment. So it's a very effective strategy for that. In terms of other tasks for collaboration, these are more tasks in terms of identifying what you want to learn and then how to find like minds. So choice-based needs is, you can do this in a variety of situations. If you're studying different energy sources, or if you're doing a review before a math test, I might make different stations around the room. If I'm doing decimals, and I've got one on rounding and one on adding and subtracting decimals, one on writing them in sentences, and one on different techniques, right? And then I'll say, these are all review stations. Go to where you think you want to learn the most, or somewhere where you want to practice. And so they disperse around the room, and I get a really good sense as to which ones need what. And when they sit down and they're with the group, they're like mind. They know that they're tackling the same thing at the same time with somebody else. A rotational checklist works really well too if you want them to go to those stations and then check them off as they go to them, because you want to ensure they hit them they hit all of them. They can go and move at their own flow, but they're going through. Mashup is kind of fun. Mashup's a little bit different. It's when you have one big group goal. So say you want the big objective is to show that to show that how GMOs impact the planet, and that's the big idea. And maybe you create a rubric as a class together. Well, we want to prove the big idea. We want 3 reasons why it works, some evidence to support each reason. Okay, so how can we prove this? What sort of things, what products can we create that would prove this? And give them a little sticky, have them move around, talk to other people. Maybe one wants to do a slideshow, one wants to do a presentation, one wants to do a poster. And they chat, they find people that want to do similar things, but then they also find people that want to do different things. And they mash up their products to create one product together. So it's sort of a collaboration consensus routine where they develop their product in a sort of group effort sort of way. And that's a really effective little routine for giving them autonomy, giving them voice, and forcing them to work together to create something together. So just some fun routines about collaboration. And I know autonomy is a big part of that. So Kathryn's going to speak to autonomy and how we have some routines for that.
Okay, I'm going to move the slides. There we go. All right. So autonomy. I'm not going to explain much why autonomy is incredibly important in a classroom. I think even those who are not educators can easily figure out why. But I would say it's a big thing to me to look around my classroom and look at the routines I use and to see how I can transfer autonomy to students through those routines. And I think we could probably write a book just about how we can build executive functioning through routines. So here's a few of them. The first one is classroom scavenger hunts. We start the year off with a scavenger hunt of the classroom so that students can move around the classroom and see where things are. It's really important for me when you're building routines is to not change where you put things in the classroom. So for instance, we have one place in the classroom for students to hand things in, creatively called the in bin. I won't let any student give me something. Here, Miss O'Brien, I'm done. I'm like, no, put it in the in bin, because for me, that's a routine I need. It helps me out, and it also helps the students out because they know where to put things. So at the beginning of the year, we do this classroom scavenger hunt. They see where everything is in the classroom. Things are labeled. They know where they are. Then I have a little hidden routine within that. I need a better name for it. It's called teacher tallies. Those people who know me are probably laughing right now because they know about my teacher tallies, but the way teacher tallies work is this. So if a student comes to me and says, I need a ruler, I say to them, no problem. I'm happy to show you where the rulers are. It's just one small teacher tally charge for that. And yeah, we move on. And what the teacher tallies are their points that I collect. I talked to you about the dino fish. These are things that are for me. And so what happens is once I've earned 20 teacher tallies, then I get a prize. So my prize might be a silent lunch. That's a really popular one for me. Or I like to run, so I take them on a class run. Or at this time of year, maybe we're going to spend some time as a class to draw some tropical pictures to inspire us that it's not always going to be winter. So that's the way the teacher tallies work. And I can tell you that I have never seen students help each other out more when they know they have some accountability if they don't try and do things on their own. So that's a little autonomy trick that I use in my class. The think marks, you can see a think mark there on the screen. I love using bookmarks for anything as learning tools. They could be used as an anchor chart. They could be used where students could take notes. They can be used to have information you want them to remember as they're reading. They're great for math or science. The WeWa list, okay, you're starting to probably realize that I'm a sucker for any acronym that sounds weird and catchy. So the WeWa list was because I am horrible at keeping a word wall. So the WeWa list is a way for me to keep sort of words present in our classroom that students are wondering about. So it's words I wonder about, WeWa. And this is a little list. I get the kids to keep it in their pencil bins, and then they add to this list words that they misspell or words they're curious about. And those can sometimes be brought into our wordplay routine. And I found that really helpful. And online, sometimes we used a Padlet where we had a class Padlet and we used that as our WeWa, and that they really loved. But I think it's really important when I was talking about reflecting on routines, that I needed to find a routine that was really accessible to the students and to myself. And then mystery words is a fun one. Again, as I reveal some of the weird and wonderful things we do in the class, this is something the students often help me with when we are working on quiet work in the classroom. I will say, wherever I am in the classroom, mystery word, rainbow pickles. I always have to choose something weird. And then I'll ask students, okay, can you and you tell me the mystery words? And they love it. They're like, oh, rainbow pickles, rainbow pickles. And then we're like, great. We talked about those community incentives. That might be a dino in the jar. Online, this worked incredibly well when students had their cameras off. So if I said mystery word, farting unicorns, and then I asked a few students to repeat that back to me, they love it. And they also love thinking of mystery words that we can say. And then the agenda stamps was just the idea of using agenda stamps to stamp their work. And you might have different agenda stamps that might mean different things with their work. If you want them to continue working on it, if you want them to double check it, you might have a certain agenda stamp you use. And what page is a fun one that Jen came up with. And that is, instead of telling them to go to page 66, tell them to go to page 33 times 2. So a really simple way to get them engaged. And now, as we move from building on autonomy, Jen is going to talk to us about some of the routines around assessment.
I got great. Thank you, Kathryn. So these are some nice little routines for just assessment. I'm going to do ongoing assessment, and I'm going to do summative assessment after. And then I've got some self-assessment ones too. So for ongoing assessment, 2 of my favorites, and you can see the kids quickly posed for this picture for me today, or no, I think it was a week ago, but they posed for it. They were so excited. The hand continuum. The hand continuum is one I use consistently, either online or in the classroom all the time. The bottom of the screen is 0. Where am I here? 0. And the top is 100%. Or if I'm in the classroom, the table's 0 and the top is 100%. And I use this as a check-in, like easily well throughout the day. I used it today to check in how they were feeling. And then that prompted my mood gauge. But I'll ask them a question such as, how did you feel about the lesson on lattice that we just did? Do you have an algorithm for multiplication that you feel comfortable with? 0 to 100. How are you doing on your project right now? Have you done the research for your function question? 0 to 100. And I can scan the room really quickly and I can get a sense of where my room is. Like, guys, you know what? You need another 10 minutes. I get it. Let's go. I can also use it just as a discussion prompt. I can be like, okay, guys, how did you think about that character's choice during the last novel study? I completely agree with it. 0 to 100. I'm like, oh, you totally agree with that? Why would you agree with that choice? And it prompts discussions really nicely. Another really quick ongoing assessment routine I use is the whiteboard. I have one in every child's desk. I've had the same set for like about 6 years, and I just keep making sure I get them back again. I use these really frequently. I use them for my check-ins, for more my rote learning stuff at the beginning of my lesson. So beginning of math, beginning of grammar, beginning of spelling. I might say the sneaky cat jumped over the fence. They have to write it down, and I'll look at it and go, okay, circle the verb. And they flip the whiteboard up, and I look across. Yep. Okay, double check yours. Or I'll say circle the noun, and I can see really quickly who's got the concept that we studied the day before and who doesn't, and that helps me move forward on my lesson. Decimals. 1 and 200ths. Write it down in words and then put it in expanded form. Flip. Okay, great. This one flips slower. Great. When I start this next lesson up, I know it's going to be heavier for that one. I'm going to go back to him, not because he always struggles, but because he didn't get yesterday's concept. So it just helps me with ongoing assessment and keeping track of them on a regular basis. One of my other favorites, and so those are 2 for ongoing assessment. In terms of summative assessment, you do that big lesson at the beginning of the year and you teach them how to like thoroughly check their work, and then you kind of cross your fingers and hope that they do it all year long. This 3 C's check is a great one for it. So every time and this is one of Kathryn's babies too, and I think this is brilliant. And every time you've done the lesson, they understand what it means to thoroughly check their work. You did it in September, right at the beginning. And then so they have to hand in a piece of paper. They have to hand in their work. And it's just a summative task. So then in each page, they look at it and go, okay, is it complete? Great. It gets a C. Next page. Is it complete? Great. It gets a C. Next page. And they all get C's for complete. The next C is it clear and easy to understand? So if it's a math task, did I show my work? If it's a writing task, is it neat and easy to read? C. Yep, it is. And the final one is it correct? So I'm checking my work for accuracy. And then it gets a final C. So at the very end, each Each page has a 3 C's on it, which shows that they've thoroughly checked their work. And sometimes I have my kids actually write on it, I have thoroughly checked my work. Sometimes for accountability for their families, if there's a little concern over that. Sometimes just to get them to write the word thoroughly a few times. So it's all over. One of the other routines I really like is 2 visits and a submit. It's a kind of a fast-paced one, where if they're writing something small, such as a shorter piece of work, like a poem or a paragraph, it will take them a big chunk of time, but not hours. I'll say you get 2 visits and then you have to submit it. And during those 2 visits, I'll quickly skim it and I'll give them a little bit of a level or a little bit of feedback. So look at it and go, you know what, this looks really good. I think you're somewhere between a 2 and a 3, but you need to add some better vocabulary. Send them back. I just tallied on my teacher's chart, on my class list, that one's had 1 visit. It's really good for the kids that want to visit you all the time. It slows them down, but it's also really good for the kids that don't seek out feedback, and reminding them that learning is sort of an ongoing process, and to come get some feedback and improve their work before they do that final submit. So those are, you know what? I don't know how I'm doing for time. Probably, oh no, I was going to say the sticky note goal setting is really cute too, where they write a goal for their task. And then they work on their task. And as they're working on their task, every time they reach that goal, they do a little tally mark. So if their goal is to ask questions if they're concerned, or to focus instead of being distracted, or, they just tally mark it on their little sticky where they've written down their goal. And then when they hand that task in, the sticky note is attached to it. So not only do you get the task, but you get to see their productivity and the goal that they set for that task. So some really nice routines for assessment and keeping on top of them and moderated. Kathryn's going to give us the routines now for digital citizenship.
Hey there. We are mindful of time, which is why we probably, if we were going to check in the chat right now, we are talking a little fast. We do have some more routines to show you, but we know how busy and full our evenings are. So please remember that this is being recorded. And so we're here until the end of the slides, but if you're not able to be, that's okay. You will get a recording tomorrow and you can check this out. So digital citizenship, there are a few people who are visiting this webinar right now who have been very helpful in forming these ideas around digital citizenship. That's Ariel and Sarah Barkley, who I saw them pop up in the chat. So thank you for your help with this. We didn't write a chapter in our first book around digital citizenship, but after 2.5 years now of pivoting between online, hybrid, and class, we realized that it's essential to build routines where we're teaching students to be responsible with their technology and safe. Reality Check is one that comes from Media Smarts, which is a Canadian digital and media resource. It was designed for grade 9 students, but it can be easily adapted to younger students. This Reel for You is from someone I follow online, and it's called Learning with Sandy. I can put that in the chat, but she has these kind of checklists available for all different age groups. And I love my acronyms. And that one really stood out to me about how to check if a website is safe. Rethinking technology is really quick. And that's just having conversations, being in a routine of having conversations with your students if digital technologies are the best way to go for whatever you're working on at that moment. Because my students usually will emphatically say, absolutely, until we take a better look and think, maybe if we are going to use digital technologies, they're not going to be as helpful to us right now if we use paper and pencil. Degrees of focus, that is Jen has laptops in her classroom, and she talks about the degrees of focus and has a routine. Should your laptop be at 45 degrees? We're talking right now, it should be like this. Should be at 180 degrees closed because we're closing off. So she gives them some indicators using the degrees of focus. The check-in, I put this in the resource page, a whole bunch of different ways you can check in, and that is getting into the routine with your students, both when you're online, this might happen in a breakout room, but also in class, if they are working on their screens, is getting into a routine of getting them to put their screens down and interacting with people beside them. And so those prompts for the check-in from Inquiry by Fire, there's some excellent just like talking points, like turn to the person beside you, degrees of focus, 180, turn to the person beside you and talk about your favorite kind of ice cream, like just getting them off the screens and getting them to sort of recalibrate. And then one last thing to mention is Common Sense Educators. It is a website that I found is very great for digital citizenship. You need to sign up, but it is free. And there are videos and lessons from K through 6 that are age appropriate and catchy. And of course, they have lots of acronyms. So I'm all over common sense educators. Now, Jen's going to move us into some of the nitty gritty routines about how to begin your school day.
Morning routines are awesome. So these are some morning routines just to keep the consistency of the day. So the kids have a schedule, and I mentioned earlier how we talk about the day and give them a sense of which ones are active and which ones are calm ones, so they can see their coping toolbox of how they're going to do, and how to manage themselves. I always I'm up in my board when the kids walk in. So I'm excited for the Olympics. I agree with the character that we studied last night. I sometimes might have an attendance graph. This is my favorite energy source, and all the bottom ones are listed. My weekend was, and then there's like excited, boring, active, and I have their little names at the beginning of the year, and I put them on cardboard, I laminate them, and I stick magnets on the back, and then that's just theirs, and they put it up on the magnetic whiteboard when they walk in, and we use that to prompt our morning discussion. So as they enter in the classroom, we sit down, and that's our morning discussion prompt. So it's really nice because it creates a nice classroom community first thing in the morning. I can use that to launch or to guide whatever lesson I'm doing next. It's one of my favorites. The how many days have we been in school was a student teacher of mine, I think like a decade ago, David Azorio. He was amazing. And you know how you put the popsicle sticks in for when you're counting the days of school? I taught grade 1 for so many years, but the one-to-one correspondence, right? One popsicle stick for ones column, tens column, hundreds column. He did this to complement it, and I thought this was genius. He used space on a chart paper, and he said, how many days have we been in school? And when he pulled out the one, he had one popsicle stick. And so then we made a legend beside it, and one was no big deal. When he had 2, he's like, oh, 2. If we were playing outside, would you both have a partner to play with? Yes, 2. That's amazing. We'll call that even. And so what do you want to do for even? What would be fun? Well, we could put little lines under it. Okay, we'll put some little brown lines under it. And then every time another even number came up, we'd put the lines under it. So we'd use the counting the days of school to get number sense and factors. And even though they were really little and they did understand that, the full concept of factors, by the time we got to 12 days of school and then 24, they were excited because this number was explosive. It had so many connections. And that was a great little routine for it as well. In terms of homework notes, that's a really great routine too. When they come in, there's a little stash of homework notes. If for some reason they didn't do their homework, they pick up the slip of paper, they explain why they didn't do the homework, they sign their name, they put it in with the homework bin. So later on, when I'm marking all of the homework, I can check out that slip, see that they didn't do it. The reason why, I sign my name off of it and it goes home. And so that just keeps accountability and keeps track of all of that. Morning theme days, maybe Tuesday's your tongue twister Tuesday. Wednesdays are World Watch Wednesday. So there's always a global attendance question. Little acronyms and little fun days like that keep them all excited. So those are some fun morning routines that we use. Kathryn, over to you for the end of the day.
Which is great because we're almost at the end of our presentation. So the end of the day, for me, I think how I wrap up the end of the day is incredibly important for both myself and the students. I hate the feeling of hurtling towards the end of the day and scrambling to get things done. So when I think about any routine I bring in at the end of the day, they all involve making sure the classroom's clean, making sure that students leave understanding if they need to do any homework, and that I can leave my classroom behind and that I'm ready for tomorrow. So a few fun ones just to throw out there. The mystery item cleanup at the end of the day. And again, the students love to be involved in this. As they're cleaning up the room, choose some item that's out of place, and that's the mystery item, and see if they can find that item. I love timers for this, and we'll usually have 5 minutes to do our cleanup, and they can see if they can find that mystery item within that 5 minutes. And boy, do they ever get excited about the mystery item. Sometimes I'll give them hot and cold cues, but sometimes I just let them figure it out. Desk checklist. This is not a new one at all. I've seen so many different teachers use this. I love to do this where the students help create the desk checklist and then they put it on their desk. And usually when they do those kind of desk checklists, whenever possible, taking pictures of the items like from our actual classroom that they need to put into that desk checklist as a visual, I found really important. Another little handy thing, again, an acronym, is one of my colleagues introduced me to the bin list, which is the books I need list, and writing it on the board. What books do you need to have if you need to bring work home? And that connects to the idea of the color-coded homework, which you can see the images of. And it's pretty simple. It just shows if Blue is the World Watch Wednesday duotang. You write that in blue on the homework board, and then that duotang they're taking out of the class is blue. And I find that so helpful for me, because then if I'm standing at the door checking out, I know what colors I'm looking for instead of trying to find loose papers. Invisalign is one that I've used to help us from the scramble out the door. And the students have to try and line up and be invisible and stand invisibly and wait while you are making sure that you're just wrapping everything up you need to do. Ticket out the door, that is one so many teachers use. Sometimes they use a paper ticket. Sometimes we use a scale of how we're feeling. Sometimes we use a finger graph of how we're feeling or how we understand something. It's just a good way to check assessment. And now as we move forward, Jen's going to finish us up with routines that extend beyond the classroom.
Oh, yes, it's just having fun with trying to mark there. Slow motion mark tomorrow, maybe slow motion. We're getting faster and faster. These are routines to make sure that our classroom community beyond our classroom is still part of our community. Oh, look at, there's no W1 review. Oops, sorry about that. Two things is just is a routine that Kathryn and I were taught a really long time ago by one of our administrators. And it's just that every time you go into a parent meeting, keep in your back pockets, as a teacher routine, two things that you can claim about that child, so that when you meet with those parents or their caregivers or whoever's watching over the child, you can sit there and say, you know what, I noticed this, or yes, that child's really good at this, or they're struggling with this, and something authentic, so that it shows that you have that connection, and you have that, it puts you in a space where all of a sudden you know their child and they're more open to your feedback. So keeping that in your back pocket is a really helpful little trick. Problem discussion sheet is a great routine. You have a bunch of, and we have a bunch in our book actually for all the different age groups, but this one's just a quick model. The kids, if there was a problem or a kerfuffle at recess or during the class time, they can write down, it's time to fill the sheet. They can write down what the problem was and what their resolution is. They come over, they bring me the problem sheet. I debrief the situation for them, help them handle it, sign off on it. It goes home, and then it gets signed by mom and dad and dad or whoever's caregiving for these children, and then comes back again. And then I know parent-teacher interview days, the ones that have 0 sheets and the ones that have 17 sheets. And we also know that everybody's on board and everybody's really aware of all of these. Routines that have existed forever, the Friday letters, I love those because it's the autonomy. It makes it so the children are really accountable for sharing what they did every week. Brainstorming on a Friday, all of the different activities for the week, they write the letter to their parents. You can slip in a teaching somebody note where they have to not only share what they're doing, but also teach someone else what they learned that day. Fantastic routine so that you're not the one constantly emailing back once a month or once every couple of weeks what's going on in your classroom. You've given that to the child and you've given their voice authority. Take home folder, just like I have my routine every Monday is language, every Wednesday is World Watch Wednesday, and every day of math. Kathryn has one where they take home their folder. They get it once a week, and all of the work from the week gets home, and they get to stay and they get to reflect on it and they get to learn from it. So it's a really nice way to just sort of, the parents, the family know that this is coming home and it's going to be part of their learning, and they can share and take a look at it together. So just some routines again about going beyond the classroom and sharing ideas with the greater community and keeping the families roped in. And Kathryn, do you want to speak to our resource page? We made it in how many?
So the resource page, so you're going to get a PDF of this slideshow, and then you'll be able to access all the resources on this resource page. So you just need to click on the image and it will take you to the resource. And you will also, a few people have asked, you will also get a video recording of this webinar in case you missed anything when we moved into our warp speed to make sure we could cover all the amazing routines we wanted to cover. So that will give you access to that. And we put up our Twitter accounts here if you want to reach out to us. It would be so good to hear from you if you have any routines or any questions that you have about the routines that we mentioned. Now, Lionel did say I have to figure out a way to go out with a bang, and I can't figure out a real way to go out with a bang, except that I'm obviously stuttering over my words a little bit. But we just wanted to thank you all so much for gathering here with us tonight. A Thursday night at this time for me is not always a really energetic time. So that you came out and showed up, and we know many of our friends and colleagues are here and listening to us, and it really helped me out to see your names in the chat. So thank you to all of you who gathered here. And Lionel, not quite a bang, but that is it for us.
That was, the whole session was a great bang, how we call it that. So thank you very much. And in the chat, folks are starting to say thank you and well done. And so on behalf of everyone today, as you said, it's Thursday evening, and everyone, you can tell from the chat, was engaged and appreciated the time and effort you put in to such a detailed and informative session. So thank you very much. And I'll just repeat it one more time for folks that that the link does come out tomorrow with an email, and there'll also be in there a code for $5 off if you're interested in purchasing their book. So we're happy to offer that as well as part of being a participant in our presentation tonight. So I'll just leave the last word to both of you and say to everyone, have a good evening, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Much.